The North Atlantic, 1,941. The Bismarck, 50,000 tons of German Stelis, one day from safety. She is a fortress. But the Royal Navy's last hope isn't another battleship. It's 15 biplanes, obsolete, canvas-winged aircraft, flying into a hurricane. Their mission: achieve a 1-in-a-million shot or lose the war. May 26th, 1941. 1,900 hours, North Atlantic. The deck of the HMS Ark Royal is a bucking, metal monster. It's not just rising and falling, it's lurching. Great green-grey waves, 50 feet high, crash over the bow, sending sheets of icy spray smashing across the flight deck. The wind isn't just blowing, it's a physical wall, a solid 60 mile-per-hour shriek that threatens to tear a man from his feet. Below decks, in the humid, fuggy air of the pilot's briefing room, the men are already exhausted. They're cold, damp, and sick. Just hours ago, they'd launched in this same gale, flown on instruments through blinding rain, and found a battleship. They had attacked it with grim determination, only to discover, to their horror, that the torpedoes they'd dropped were aimed at HMS Sheffield, one of their own cruisers. By some miracle, the Sheffield had dodged all 11 torpedoes, whose new magnetic detonators had mostly exploded on hitting the water anyway. The mood is beyond grim, it's desperate. They are the pilots and observers of 810, 818, and 825 naval air squadrons. Their target, the German battleship Bismarck, is out there, somewhere in the gloom. This single ship has become the focus of the entire Royal Navy. 3 days ago, she had vaporized the Hood, the pride of the fleet, in a single salvo, killing 1,415 men. Now, Bismarck is wounded, leaking fuel, but she is fast. She is racing for the safety of Brest, France. If she makes it under the umbrella of the Luftwaffe, she's gone. She will haunt the Atlantic convoy routes for the rest of the war. Admiral Sir James Somerville, commanding Force H, knows this. The main British fleet under Admiral Tovey is too far behind. The Ark Royal, with her flimsy biplanes, is the only asset that can stop her. This is, quite literally, the last chance. A new briefing is called. The men, still shaking off the adrenaline and shame of the Sheffield incident, shuffle back in. This time, the torpedoes will be armed with old, reliable contact detonators. The attack must be launched now. Darkness is falling, and the storm is getting worse. We're not talking about Spitfires or hurricanes. We're talking about the Fairey Swordfish, the Stringbag, a biplane. It's an aircraft that looks like it belongs in the last war, not this one. Its canvas stretched over a metal frame, braced with wires that sing in the wind. Its top speed, with a torpedo strapped to its belly, is barely 100 miles per hour less than the gale force wind they're about to fly into. To attack the most advanced battleship on the planet, Britain is sending 15 flying antiques, crewed by 3 men each, a pilot, an observer, and a telegraphist air gunner. On the flight deck, it is pure, unadulterated chaos. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, a man whose courage borders on the divine, prepares to lead his squadron. He and his pilots have to time their takeoff for the split second. The bow of the Ark Royal reaches the top of its 55-foot pitch. If they time it wrong, the deck will simply fall away from beneath them, and they'll plunge straight into the sea. Or worse, the bow will rise up and smash them. The engines roar a wet, throaty cough against the storm. One by one, the stringbags stagger into the air. They are immediately hammered by the wind, tossed like paper kites. One pilot is momentarily blinded by spray, and his plane's wingtip nearly scrapes the carrier's island. They can barely form up. They climb, slowly, painfully, into a black, churning sky, clawing for altitude in 3,000-foot thick clouds of solid rain. They are flying almost blind, relying entirely on their observers' calculations and the Ark Royal's primitive radar vectors to find a single, grey ship in 1 million square miles of angry ocean. The flight is a special kind of hell. The crews are in open cockpits. Every man is encased in his thick, fleece-lined Irvine suit, but the 60 mph plus wind, combined with the freezing rain, finds every gap. Their goggles are useless, instantly fogged or covered in oil and spray. The pilots, like Lieutenant A. John Moffat, are forced to fly with their heads out in the slipstream, the icy blast hitting their faces like a fist. The aircraft themselves are being physically pushed backward by the headwind. In the observer's cockpit, men like Sub-Lieutenant Dusty Miller are fighting to navigate. Their charts are soaked, their hands numb. They're relying on the primitive ASV radar sets flickering green lines on a tiny cathode ray tube hoping for a contact. They are flying into the setting sun, which occasionally bursts through the roiling clouds, blinding them one moment and plunging them back into Stygian darkness the next. Their first waypoint is HMS Sheffield. The cruiser is shadowing Bismarck from a safe distance, a 12-mile radar tether to the German behemoth. The Sheffield is their pointer. Around 20-35 hours, the Sheffield looms out of the mist below them. The pilots, still raw from their earlier mistake, give the ship a wide berth. The Sheffield flashes an Aldis lamp at them. Enemy, 12 miles ahead. This is it. The 15 Swordfish split into 3 subflights, commanded by Esmond, Godfrey Fawcett, and Coode. They drop down, skimming the wave tops. This is a deliberate tactic. By flying at just 50 or 60 feet, they hope to get under the Bismarck's primary and secondary gun batteries. The ship's main 15-inch and 5.9-inch guns simply cannot depress low enough to target them. But this tactic also puts them directly in the kill zone of her lighter anti-aircraft guns. At 2047, they burst through a wall of rain, and there she is. She is not a ship, she is a fortress. The Bismarck is a churning, malevolent mountain of grey steel, 50,000 tons of fury. Even wounded, she is making 20 knots, throwing up a colossal bow wave. And she sees them. In an instant, the sky explodes. The Bismarck unleashes a volume of fire that no pilot has ever witnessed. The air is filled with black, greasy puffs of smoke from the heavy 105mm, 4.1-inch flak. Bright red, green and white tracers from the 37mm and 20mm cannons reach out like fiery tentacles, creating a dense, impenetrable web of high explosive shells and cannon fire. The German gunners are superb. They are firing into the sea, deliberately creating 100-foot-high splashes of water, trying to physically smash the low-flying biplanes out of the air. The pilots don't fly through this. They ride it. Their fabric-covered planes are buffeted by the shockwaves of near misses. The air stinks of cordite. They jink, weave, and skid, throwing their aircraft around in maneuvers that would tear the wings off a faster, more modern plane. The Swordfish's low speed is, ironically, its greatest defense. The German gunners, with their advanced fire control computers, are overestimating the speed of the antique biplanes. Their deflection shots are leading the targets too much. Esmond leads the first wave in. His plane is hit almost immediately. Canvas is ripped from the fuselage, control wires are frayed. His telegraphist, Jock Scott, radios back. Am hit in back. Then silence. Esmond presses on. They are inside the kill zone now, so close they can see the flashes from the muzzles of the guns, see the helmeted figures of the German gun crews frantically working their weapons. The noise is indescribable, the thrum of their own engine, the scream of the wind in their bracing wires, and the constant, deafening WHUMP, WHUMP, WHUMP of the flak. They are flying into the very jaws of the beast. The attack becomes a desperate, chaotic ballet. The Swordfish, committed to their runs, split into sections, forcing Captain Ernst Lindemann on the Bismarck's bridge to make impossible choices. This is the Anvil attack squadrons coming in from different angles at once. If he turns to starboard to comb the tracks, steam parallel, of one set of torpedoes, he presents his broadside to the planes attacking from port. A plane from 810 Squadron, piloted by Sub-Lieutenant Dusty Miller, bores in. His observer is screaming the diminishing range. The 37mm pom-poms are walking their tracers right up to his engine. At 800 yards, he drops. The 1,600-pound torpedo plunges into the sea, a splash of white, and then it's running. Simultaneously, Lieutenant Commander Esmond, his plane already a wreck, his gunner silent, somehow holds his Swordfish steady and releases his own tinfish. Planes are hit. Fabric is shredded from wings, revealing the skeletal spars beneath. Wires snap. Control surfaces get sluggish as bullets tear through the canvas. One swordfish is so riddled with holes that the pilot, Sub-Lieutenant Lawson, can feel the wind whistling through the cockpit floor. His leg is soaked in hydraulic fluid. Another plane, flown by Sub-Lieutenant Beale, has its entire upper left wing blown apart, yet the biplane, incredibly, stays in the air. On the Bismarck's bridge, lookouts are screaming, "Torpedoes to port! Torpedoes to starboard!" The first torpedo, likely Miller's, strikes home. A colossal pillar of water erupts amidships on the port side. The Bismarck shudders, as if punched by a giant. But this is what she was built for. The torpedo explodes against the 12.6-inch thick main armor belt. It holds. The ship is wounded, flooding a compartment, but she is not crippled. A second torpedo hits the starboard armor belt with the same result. The battleship, though bleeding, steams on, her guns still firing with terrifying accuracy. The attack seems to be failing. But then comes the last group. 3 swordfish from 818 Squadron, having lost contact in the clouds, had circled around and are now approaching from Bismarck's starboard quarter her stern. The ship's main flak batteries are all pointed abeam, engaging the main attack. This last group comes in almost unmolested. At that exact moment, Captain Lindemann is ordering a hard turn to port to dodge the torpedoes running from his starboard side. It is a fatal maneuver. The turn swings the battleship's stern out, presenting the most vulnerable part of the ship to the oncoming planes. The pilots in this last wave, among them Lieutenant A. John Moffat, can't believe their luck. They are aiming at the Bismarck's stern. They drop their torpedoes. At 21:05, one of these last torpedoes runs true. It does not hit the armor belt. It strikes the Bismarck far aft, on the port side, in the one place unprotected by heavy armor, the rudder assembly. The 485 pounds of Torpex detonates with a cataclysmic force. The explosion is inside the ship. It rips the 250-ton port rudder clean off its mountings and smashes it, twisting it like a piece of tin foil. It simultaneously slams the parallel starboard rudder so hard that it becomes immovably jammed at a 12-degree angle to port. The steering gear room itself is obliterated, instantly flooded. The explosion is so violent it hurls a man against the armoured bulkhead, killing him instantly, and slams the Bismarck's massive 15-inch C and D gun turrets off their roller bearings, jamming them. Up in the air, the pilots see the column of water, higher and darker than the others, erupt from the battleship's stern. Their work is done. Low on fuel, many of their planes shot to pieces. The surviving swordfish bank away, climbing desperately for the cover of the low, dark clouds. They've dropped 13 torpedoes and scored at least 2, maybe 3 hits. They have no idea what they have truly done. Their only thought now is survival, finding the tiny pitching deck of the Ark Royal in the middle of a force 9 gale, in the dark. On the bridge of the Bismarck, the scene is one of controlled panic. The ship is reeling, not from the force of the explosion, but from its effect. Captain Lindemann is shouting orders to the helm. "Hard to starboard." The helmsman's voice comes back, strained. "Helm is hard to starboard, Captain." No response. She is not answering. Seconds later, the dreaded report comes up the voice pipe from Damage Control Central. Aft steering gear room completely flooded. All communication lost. We believe the rudder assembly is destroyed. The starboard rudder is jammed. Admiral Gunther Lutyens, a man of cold professional pessimism, understands the implication instantly. The Bismarck is making 20 knots, but she is no longer heading southeast, towards the sanctuary of France. The wind, a relentless force 9 gale from the northwest, is smashing against her high bow and superstructure. With her rudder jammed 12 degrees to port, the ship is being inexorably pushed into the wind. She is turning. Slowly, sickeningly, she is making a wide, uncontrollable circle. To port. Back towards her hunters. Lindemann tries everything. He orders the 3 mighty propellers to work against the rudder. Starboard engines full astern, port engines full ahead. The giant battleship shudders, the screws churning the sea into a foam. but it's no use. The combined power of the Atlantic gale and the jammed rudder is absolute. The 50,000-ton Predator is now a victim of physics. She is trapped in a loop. Desperate, Lutyens gives the order to send divers down. Men from the damage control parties, led by Chief Engineer Commander Wilhelm Lehmann, fight their way aft through buckled corridors. They open a hatch to the steering gear room and are met by a solid wall of black, freezing water. It's hopeless. The room is obliterated, the mechanisms mangled beyond recognition. They even consider sending men over the side, into the raging sea, to try and cut the rudder off with underwater torches. It is a suicidal, impossible idea. They try to launch one of the Arado floatplanes to carry the ship's war diary to safety, but the G-force of the ship's lurching and the high winds smash it against the catapult. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, the Swordfish pilots are fighting for their own lives. It is now 21:30. Full dark. The storm is at its absolute peak. Finding the Ark Royal in this maelstrom is a miracle of navigation. The carrier is a single black shape in a world of black water, pitching so violently that her flight deck is rising and falling over 55 feet. Admiral Somerville makes a terrifying choice. He orders the Ark Royal to turn on her lights. The entire carrier lights up like a beacon, a massive, unmissable target for any U-boat in the area. But it's the only way to save his pilots. One by one, they come in. These are not landings. They are controlled crashes. The pilots are fighting the wind, which is stronger than their landing speed. They are waved off by the landing signals officer. His illuminated bats a blur. They try again. One plane misses the wires, its engine screams, and it slams into the safety barrier. Deck crews, clinging to lifelines, scramble to cut the pilot and observer free. Another plane's undercarriage collapses on impact. But, incredibly, all 15, Swordfish or what's left of them are recovered. Some have over 100 bullet holes. In the debriefing room, the men are shaking, half frozen, their faces streaked with oil and salt. They gulp down mugs of hot tea laced with rum. "We got hits," one pilot reports. "I saw a huge flash amidships." Another, John Moffat, says, "We aimed for the stern. I saw a column of water, blacker than the others, right at the stern." As these reports are being taken, a signal lamp flashes from the HMS Sheffield. The cruiser is still on its radar plot. The message is electrifying. Enemy is reversing course. The pilots and observers look at each other. They've seen it themselves on the way back. Through a break in the black clouds, they had caught one last glimpse of their massive target. She was not fleeing. She was not racing for Brest. She was turning. Slowly, majestically, uselessly. She was steaming in a circle. The room falls silent. The 1,000,000-to-1 shot. It wasn't the hit amidships on the armor belt. It was the last torpedo, the one that hit the stern. They hadn't just wounded the beast. They had hamstrung it. They had broken its legs. The Bismarck was no longer a hunter. She was now the prey, helpless, circling, and waiting for the guns of the home fleet to arrive. For Admiral Lutyens, the reality is now absolute. The Bismarck is a dead ship. She is a floating gun platform, but she cannot steer. She is at the mercy of the wind, which continues to push her northwest, away from France, and directly into the path of Admiral Tovey's home fleet. At 21:40, Lutyens sends a chillingly formal signal to Naval Group West. "Ship unmaneuverable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." Another, more personal message is sent to Berlin. "Request send U-boat to save war diary." This is the act of a man preserving history, not a man expecting to survive. The crew's morale, once sky-high, plummets. They are the victors of the Denmark Strait, the hunters, and now they are trapped. They can hear the grinding of the damaged screws, the groan of the hull as it's battered by the 50-foot waves, and the constant, high-pitched scream of the gale. But the night's torment is only just beginning. Admiral Somerville, his carrier's primary mission complete, detaches his tribal-class destroyers. They are commanded by the notoriously aggressive Captain Philip Vian. His orders are simple. Find the Bismarck and stick to her. Harass her. Do not let her crew rest. Do not let her damage control teams work. be the wolves that harry the wounded bull. The flotilla HMS Cossack, Sikh, Zulu, Maori, and the Polish destroyer Piorun plunges into the storm. These ships are barely 2,000 tons. They are tiny next to the Bismarck. In the mountainous seas, they are in agony. They are plunging their bows deep into waves, submarining through the troughs, with green water sweeping their decks clear. The men inside are being thrown against bulkheads, but they press on. Just before 23, the Piorun's lookout spots her, a vast, dark shadow, like a city block, lurching in the storm. What happens next is one of the most audacious acts of the war. The Piorun's commander, Eugeniusz Puławski, doesn't just attack, he challenges the Bismarck. He orders his signalman to flash a message at the German giant in Morse code, "I am a Pole." Then, from a range of just 13,000 yards, the Piorun opens fire with her small 4.7-inch guns. It is a gnat stinging a rhinoceros. The Bismarck, infuriated, responds. Her massive 15-inch guns, the same guns that destroyed the Hood spit flame. The salvo is gigantic. The shells splash down near the Piorun, and the shockwave from the near misses is so violent it shorts out the destroyer's electrics and knocks men off their feet. For almost an hour, the Piorun dodges and weaves, trading shots with the most powerful battleship in the Atlantic before Vian orders her to pull back. Now, the others take over. For the next 7 hours, Vian's destroyers conduct a campaign of pure psychological terror. They close in, one by one, from different directions. They fire salvos of torpedoes, forcing the Bismarck's gunners to fire back. The Germans cannot rest. They cannot make repairs. They are surrounded by ghosts. Inside the Bismarck, it is a living nightmare. The ship is lit by dim emergency battle lanterns. The decks are canted at a steep, sickening angle. Every few minutes, the alarms blare as another destroyer is spotted. The heavy flak guns bark into the night, firing at shadows, wasting ammunition. The great 15-inch guns flash, but they are firing blind, aiming at the muzzle flashes of the destroyers in the darkness. Vian's destroyers are firing torpedoes, 16 inches all. In the chaos of the storm, with the Bismarck lurching wildly, every one of them misses. But that is not the point. The point is the exhaustion. The point is the fear. The point is to keep the Bismarck's crew at battle stations all night, staring into the black rain, knowing that with every passing minute, something far, far worse is approaching. As the first, sickly grey light of dawn breaks on May 27th, 1941, the destroyers pull back. They have done their job. The German crew is utterly spent. They are cold, soaked, and have not slept. And as they peer out into the clearing dawn, they see them. On the horizon, two massive, unmistakable silhouettes. HMS King George V and HMS Rodney. The executioners have arrived. May 27th, 1941, 8:43 hours. The sea is still high. The grey, sullen light of morning reveals a heavy swell. On the Bismarck's bridge, the men who have survived the night of harassment stare to the northwest. Their enemy is here. Admiral John Tovey, aboard his flagship HMS King George V, has them. With him is HMS Rodney, a slower, older ship from the 1922nd, but one that carries a terrifying main battery, 9 16-inch guns. These are the heaviest guns in the Royal Navy. The cruisers HMS Norfolk and HMS Dorsetshire are also closing in. This will not be a battle. It will be an execution. The Bismarck is still turning in slow, useless circles, her crew exhausted, her speed minimal. She is the perfect target. Tovey has the weather gauge, meaning he is upwind, and the smoke and spray from the 30-foot waves are blown into the faces of the German gunners, not his own. At 8:47, Rodney opens fire from 25,000 yards. The ship unleashes a full 9-gun broadside. The sound is a physical concussion, a rolling thunderclap that is felt as much as heard. Moments later, the 10 14-inch guns of King George V join the chorus. 21 tons of high-explosive, armor-piercing steel are suddenly hurtling toward the Bismarck. The German response is immediate, and incredibly, magnificently defiant. At 8:49, Bismarck's forward turrets, Anton and Bruno, fire back. Her gunnery director, under the command of Adalbert Schneider, is still functional. The German salvo is perfectly aimed. It straddles Rodney, sending colossal pillars of water drenching her decks. It is a near miss that makes the British flagship shudder. For a moment, it seems the wounded beast can still bite, but it is the last time she will fire with full accuracy. At 8:50, a 16-inch shell from Rodney smashes into Bismarck's superstructure. It rips through the upper decks, and another shell, likely a 14-incher from KGV, crashes into the main gunnery director, obliterating it in a cloud of shrapnel and flame. Adalbert Schneider and his entire team are killed instantly. The Bismarck is now blind. The British battleships are closing the range. This is not a long-range duel. This is a close-quarters mugging. Rodney steams to within 15,000 yards, then 10,000, then, in an act of utter contempt, to less than 4,000 yards point-blank range for guns designed to fire 20 miles. At this range, the 16-inch shells do not just explode, they penetrate. They act like giant, armor-piercing can openers. One shell hits the No. 2. Bruno, turret, penetrates the 1 4-inch thick faceplate and detonates the waiting cordite charges inside. The entire turret explodes, blowing the roof plate into the air. Another salvo hits the bridge. The armoured conning tower is defeated. Admiral Lütjens and Captain Lindemann, along with the entire bridge staff, are killed. The Bismarck is now blind, deaf, and leaderless. The destruction is methodical. King George V concentrates on the superstructure, while Rodney focuses on the hull. The cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire join in, their 8-inch guns adding to the deluge, ripping apart the lighter armoured sections and the anti-aircraft batteries. Inside the Bismarck is an inferno. The ship is a charnel house. Men are vaporized by direct hits, scythed down by shrapnel, burned alive in flash fires, and suffocated by thick, acrid smoke. The decks are slick with blood and hydraulic fluid. Yet, incredibly, the ship does not die. The aft turrets, Caesar and Dora, cut off from central control, continue to fire independently. At 9:31, a shell from King George V penetrates the Dora turret's barbette, the armoured shaft that feeds it ammunition. The resulting explosion silences the last of Bismarck's great guns. By 10, the Bismarck is a wreck. She is stationary, on fire from stem to stern. Her superstructure is a twisted, red-hot skeleton. Her mast has collapsed. Her hull is riddled with holes. More than 2,000 shells from 16-inch to 8-inch have hit her. But she is not sinking. Her main armour belt, the brilliant work of her designers, has held. Her hull is still watertight below the waterline. She is a ruin, but she is still floating. Admiral Tovey, his ships critically low on fuel, and with U-boats known to be in the area, cannot wait. He has done his job. The Bismarck is destroyed as a fighting unit. He turns his battleships for home. He leaves the final, grim task to the cruiser HMS Dorsetshire. Aboard the Bismarck, there is no command. There is only survival. The surviving senior officer, First Officer Hans Oels, assesses the situation. The ship is a floating slaughterhouse, an unsalvageable, burning wreck, but she will not sink. The British battleships have turned away, their guns silent. Oels makes the final decision. He gives the order that every sailor dreads: scuttle the ship. Deep within the hull, in the engine rooms that are miraculously still intact, engineering crews begin their final duty. They rig demolition charges, scuttling charges, designed to blow holes in the ship's bottom. They open the main seacocks and watertight doors, deliberately inviting the Atlantic to come in and claim the ship that had, until now, so defiantly resisted it. They are killing their own ship to prevent her capture. Above, the HMS Dorsetshire, commanded by Captain Benjamin Martin, moves in for the coup de grace. The cruiser closes to just 3,600 yards on Bismarck's starboard side. At this range, it is impossible to miss. At 10:20, Dorsetshire fires two 21-inch torpedoes. Both hit home, sending shudders through the ruined hull. The cruiser then steams around to the port side and fires a third torpedo from 2,200 yards. This one also hits. The combined effect of the internal scuttling charges and the fresh torpedo hits is immediate. The Bismarck, which had remained on a near-even keel despite the horrific shelling, finally begins to list. It starts slowly, then accelerates. The men still alive on her decks, hundreds of them, begin to jump. They leap from the fiery, canted steel into the freezing, oil-choked water. Some are seen saluting their ship before they jump. At 10:36, the great ship is at a 45-degree angle. Her stern is completely underwater. Her bow rises high into the air, revealing the full extent of the damage. Then, with a final, shuddering groan, the pride of the German Navy, the terror of the Atlantic, capsizes. She turns over, her red keel pointing at the grey sky, and begins her 4,000-metre plunge to the ocean floor. At 10:39, on May 27th, 1941, the Bismarck vanishes. The sea is now a black, churning mass of oil, wreckage, and men. Hundreds of German sailors, many wounded air, clinging to debris, struggling to stay afloat in the heavy swell. The British, their bloodlust gone, switch to rescue. The Dorsetshire and the destroyer Maori stop their enginessa. Terrifyingly dangerous move in U-boat-infested watersand, begin pulling men from the sea. They throw ropes, scramble down nets, and haul the oil-soaked, half-drowned survivors aboard. But just as the rescue is getting underway, a lookout screams, "Periscope!" An alarm blares. A U-boat later, identified as U-74, which had arrived to find its mighty battleship gone, is spotted. The Dorsetshire and Maori have no choice. They are sitting ducks. To stay is to risk being torpedoed themselves. With a cruelty that only war can dictate, their engines roar to life. They abandon the rescue. They leave hundreds of men behind. The survivors aboard the British ships, and the men left in the water, watch in horror as the vessels steam away, leaving them to their fate. Of the Bismarck's 2,221-man crew, only 115 would be rescued. Over 2,100 men were gone, either killed in the battle or left to die in the freezing Atlantic. The hunt was over. The Hood was avenged. But the victory was not truly won by the 16-inch guns of the Rodney or the 14-inch guns of the King George V. Those ships had merely delivered the killing blow to an animal that was already chained. The fate of the Bismarck had been sealed the night before, in a Force 9 gale. It was sealed by 15 canvas-covered biplanes, flying so slowly they were almost stationary in the headwind. It was sealed by the courage of men like Eugene Esmond and John Moffat, who flew into a wall of flak that should have annihilated them. And it was sealed by a single 1,000,000-to-1 torpedo, a 485-pound charge of Torpex that, in a split second, jammed the rudder and crippled the beast, allowing the Royal Navy to close in for the kill.